everything is going to be all right. The future is a beautiful place, but you'll need some training in order to inhabit it. In the future, technology evolves faster than any human mind can think. When the singularity occurred, we became like gods, able to create entire worlds in the blink of an eye. Every thought had drastic immediate impact. All of our dreams became a reality. But so did our nightmares. The future became a battle of ideas. We had to learn to direct our minds to prevent dark psychological forces from destroying all of us. Now, with every new world we create, we summon the sacred imperative for life. Let there be light. 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 How can we be from the future, you might ask? Let us explain. Plants harvest light with near-perfect efficiency. But this is impossible under classical physics. Along the way to the photosynthesizing core, photons of light should collide with other particles. But they don't. A photon reaching the core is as likely to succeed as you sprinting blindfolded through a dense forest, reaching the center without striking a single tree. Plants are engaged in a kind of miracle. The plant puts the photon into a state of quantum superposition, multiplying it by every route that photon could possibly take. Imagine blindly sprinting through a forest, being multiplied into every one of the billions of possible paths. If any one of your possibilities were observed hitting a tree, the superposition would collapse, and that would be your final outcome. But the plant patiently refuses to observe any of these casualties, while at its heart it continues to sing, "Let there be light. Let 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 there be light." When any of the possibilities finally reaches the core without fail, only that winner is observed. All the other possibilities disappear. The winner is transmitted back through time, from the future, and becomes the only possibility that ever existed. This is how photons reach the plant's core with impossible precision. This is how you and every organism in existence overcame the massive improbabilities of life. This is how we are from the future. This is how you will become the light of the world, as we invoke the sacred imperative together. Let there be light.
The point of this wonderful gathering is to explore our potential and our possibilities from as many levels as we can. And I think you've already had a wonderful sample this morning. So I'm going to take it now from a more personal perspective. We've heard a lot about the vastness of the cosmos, and we hear a lot more from the Drs. Hurtak. But my particular presentation, we're going to look at how we have a potential within us that is often untapped. We're only now beginning to appreciate what these possibilities might be. We look at beings in the past that have shown us some amazing things. But we say, oh, well, that's all right for them because they were more advanced, or they were masters, or whatever. And I know that now is the time for us all to be light, to be the masters that we can be. So I love the line in there, you can become the light of the world. Yes. So I'd like to share a little bit of my perspective on, very briefly, some of the ways. I'm a very how-to person, as those who've worked with me know. I like to take the information and absorb and distill it, and then find the how-tos. Because, yes, we need information, but we also as Dr. Hertak also mentioned this morning, we've got to put it into practice. So what can each one of us do as an inspiration, as a light inspiration in the world? Otherwise, if we don't take this responsibility and as a joy, as one of the clips showed you today, we're going to be stuck in what Albert Einstein said, Earth is the insane asylum of the universe. So instead of that, let's move on to another thing he actually said. A new type of thinking is essential if mankind is to survive and move towards higher levels. Okay, so what's a new type of thinking? And all the great leaders of the world are saying similar things in their particular terminology. So, to me, there's some basic facts that are self-evident, and we've already heard some of them, that gives us a new type of thinking. Okay, it may not be new to us here, but it is going to be new to a lot of folk around the planet. And so I've just summed up a few points. Obviously, there are many, many more, but just a few of the real basic ones. So we have this new type of thinking. And Dr. Hertak a long time ago coined the phrase the Homus Universalis. And I think this is the basis of it all, because first of all, we not only know our interconnectedness on every level, but we actually start living it. And as Albert Einstein also said, I love this work, it's very inspirational. He said a human being is part of a whole. A lot more in between. Then he said, our task must be to free ourselves from this prison, which is a delusion of feeling separate from everyone, from each other, by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. I'm sure you'd all subscribe to that. So interconnectedness, galactic and human and nature and so forth. And then focus, as I put on the second one, on our unity, to celebrate our diversity, but focus on the unity. And this law of unity consciousness, according to the order of Melchizedek, as I understand it, that is the only law, that there is this unifying consciousness that we are. We're all one human family, and we're also one with our higher selves and with the divine energies as well. Part of this, of course, would be mindfully living. And that means there's a lot of articles written now on mindful living, mindful meditation, and so on. I get the Scientific American journals, the Mind journals, and they're doing a lot of articles and research on a lot of these things, which we possibly have already experienced if we're on certain paths anyway. But it's now going gradually more and more mainstream. So what does it mean to be mindfully living? Because I see this as our little service to humanity, to the whole. Okay, the Buddha put it by live by right thought, right word, and right action. Can you imagine a world if we all did that? But there's the golden rule. And the golden rule, many Christians sort of feel it's theirs because it was in the Bible, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But actually, it's in pretty well all the sacred texts in the sacred texts of all the main world religions. In their own words, in fact, the wording is very, very close, whether it's from the Judaic tradition or the Islamic tradition or Confucius or the Taoism, it doesn't matter. So these are basic principles, and I know you know them, but I've just sort of identified them so that we sort of get a little picture. Then I think, for me, blending higher consciousness, science and spirituality. And as we heard this morning, this is happening. It's wonderful with pioneers such as Drs. Hertak. But there's a lot of other wonderful teachers too out there. You probably have heard Bruce Lipton, Deepak Chopra, Dr. Bernard H. There's so many out there who are actually doing this as well in their particular field of expertise. And that's, I think, part of this big shift. It's not separate. There's not spirituality and there's not science. This is the time to bring them two. And we will understand it when we realize who we truly are. Living aligned to the universal laws and principles. You've all heard of universal laws. You've all seen probably The Secret. which actually brought it into the mass consciousness that there are such things as universal laws. And just like there's the law of gravity, which whether or not you wish to believe it, it's quite immaterial, it still operates, and as one could say, if you jumped out of the window, you'd soon find that it existed. Please don't do that. But there are other universal laws, and they can be applied both, of course, on the scientific side, but also to us as human beings. And these universal laws are absolutely intrinsic to us developing who we truly are. And I'll come back to that in a little bit later and explain one or two which are sort of paramount, foundational ones, shall we say. So it's not just the law of attraction, believe you me, there's a lot more to it. And this activating our latent potential, I like to call it super self-powers. You can call it what you like, it doesn't matter. Another term for it is self-mastery. Self with a capital S, meaning, for me, higher self. In other words, self-mastery, yes, on the physical level, of course, that's essential. Otherwise, our emotions control us, or our thoughts run away with us, and so forth. So there's that level of mastery on the mental and emotional planes. But there's also a higher self-mastery. In other words, thinking beyond just this little being that we perceive ourselves to be until we start expanding our horizons. And to quote Dr. Bruce Lipton, he put it this way: to unlock the incredible powers of the mind, to connect to a higher power that provides guidance for leading a happier and more successful life. And I think, again, my favourite Albert Einstein said, I want to know God's thoughts, the rest are mere details. And I've had fun, and still am having fun, on seeing how far I can stretch in my personal little life of these boundaries that we thought were there. They're actually not there, but we thought so. And interestingly enough, just this year, Diane, some of you will know Diane, is putting together a collaborative book, and for that I was guided to put down my thoughts on what might a new consciousness or a new spirituality look like, and some of these factors, of course, are in it. And then, quite recently, I discovered, of course, other writings, and one particular lovely one was Barbara Marx Hubbard. As you know, she's a wonderful leader also. And I'll just pick out one or two little parts of it, obviously, I won't read it all. And she says that many people are leaving organized religion behind and experiencing the awakening of spirit within themselves. They are listening to the voice of their higher self, the one voice calling us all to grow in consciousness and to recreate our world. The era of the Holy Spirit incarnating has begun. I think that's really beautiful. And out of it, she says, the self-conscious humans that feel separate from each other and from nature, who are threatening our world, but there's also arising for the first time a more universal humanity. And so this crisis is inducing the birth of a more universal human. So this crossover is happening, and she lists a very similar list to the ones I've come up with: unconditional love for the whole of life, powerful, irresistible passion to unite with spirit within, and a deep, heartfelt impulse to connect with others and co-create a world equal to our love and our capacities. And then she says we should be then successfully able to birth ourselves into a more universal humanity, capable of co-evolving with nature and co-creating with spirit. So these voices are out there, and they are giving us the same story, but in words that will resonate with different people. And that's how it should be, of course. So, as I said earlier, I'm a how-to person. So, according to her, how can we co-create with spirit? And Dr. Hurtak, I've taken one little quote from him, for a new realm of consciousness to emerge. And Dr. Hurtak, I've heard him mention this, the age of the Holy Spirit, the era is the same sort of thing. So to me, one of the first things is to start connecting consciously with however you perceive the inner spirit. I call it HS, which is short for Holy Spirit, which in my understanding is the connecting link to higher self, hence the HS covers both. And restoring this connection to our higher self and the communicating essence, the inner voice of the Holy Spirit. And again, I'm quoting from Dr. Hurtak, an integral part of us is how he describes the higher self, the spiritual self, but at a higher level which we have forgotten or disassociated from, is the key to our coming in alignment with our spiritual purpose. So in this life, we can, as multidimensional beings, finally manifest a destiny that breaks the spell we have previously found ourselves in. I think that's pretty powerful stuff. Dr. Wayne Dyer, who many of you will know, his work is also out there helping a lot. He puts it this way: within all of us is a divine capacity to manifest and attract all that we require or desire. And knowing that our thoughts create reality, as we heard this morning, we begin with the following thought: I have a divine ability to manifest and attract what I require or desire. And I've been working on that, as I say, for probably 40 years, and still learning and getting a little bit quicker at it as time goes on. And so we are part of these unseen world of waves and energy. It all goes back to that. But not being a scientist, I won't go into that. I'll allow the people who do understand to explain it. Now, my terminology for the goal of what we're doing too is what I call soul ascension. So this to me is how can we, and what is it we're aiming for? It's like we're, as I understanding it, merging our physical self or our conscious human self with our higher self, and interconnecting at the same time our three minds through the Holy Spirit. Now we think we've got two minds, of course. We have the thinking mind with its left and right hemispheres, and we have the subconscious mind. And of course, for a long time there's been great research going on how the subconscious actually drives 95% of our behavior, according to Dr. Bruce Lipton, which means only 5% of what we do a lot of the time is consciously directed. That's pretty sobering when you think about it. So it behoves us to be very aware of our thoughts. That's where the mindfulness comes in. And so what can we do about these subconscious, I call them programs, that are going on, which by default kick in as soon as we take our conscious focus of whatever it is we're wishing to achieve? Well, they're made up of what we took in usually as a small child. From birth through to probably 7 years of age is the most potent time, where we take on, obviously without question, the beliefs and the thinking and all of the habits of whoever we're with, whether it's family, parents, culture, religion, peers, and so forth. And for a lot of us now who are working on this consciousness expansion, we realize that a lot of those don't fit anymore. They're not ours. They don't make sense. So once we can recognize them, then we can cancel them. Is one of my favorite techniques. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Like a check, you cancel it. Although checks are a bit outmoded now, I gather. Yeah, they did an interview on the street just recently and asked people about checks, and they asked one, she would have been a working lass, a young girl, and showed her a check, and she said, "What is it?" So that sort of shows how fast we're moving away from that into the internet and all of the digital stuff. But okay, the principle still applies. If you cancel something, but the next step is you need to replace it with what you do want. So always remember, if you're cancelling something, if you've had a negative thought or a thought that sort of popped out from the past, often you can think, oh, I heard my parents say that, or I heard so-and-so say that. Okay, that isn't mine anymore. I don't want it anymore. So cancel it and then reword and put in its place that which you do want. Anyway, I'm not going to spend any more time on that because it is a huge, huge area which if you're interested in, do go into, because it's certainly a very powerful influence in our everyday lives. So to me, it's a blending of all our lower consciousnesses, which is us, with this higher aspect of being, to raise ourselves into this higher universal human. And I found that lovely inspirational painting in Brazil when I was over there, actually the same year that to Dr. Hurtak's we were speaking at the esoteric conference in Sao Paulo. And one of her Carmen's people had painted this. Okay, it's not strictly accurate, it's inspirational artwork, of course, but it shows the human there with the doming of the higher self or the over-self. And because in the Keys of Enoch, which has been my inspiration, shall we say, since about 1991, it certainly opened my mind and moved me on to levels I was unaware of at the time. And the expression in there is the doming of the over-self, and I wondered, what does that quite mean? And if you look it up, doming comes from domus, the Latin, means to house. And I felt that painting sort of gave an impression of the housing of the human part of us by the higher self. So, how do we know this is all true anyway? I would like to check back and say, well, okay, this is fine, this is good theory. But let's just check it out and see if we've got any proof of that. And yes, we do. Even if you don't have a spiritual perspective, you don't actually, for some of this, it isn't necessary, although to me, without it, we shortchange ourselves, but that's my particular belief. But when you think about it, through history and even today, many so-called ordinary people have exhibited amazing, extraordinary powers, haven't they? And they get recorded. Somebody did this amazing thing, way beyond the normal confines of the human being. So there is evidence out there. Then we have the spiritual beings, the ascended masters, and the avatars, and beings like that, the enlightened ones who have come at different times through our history to inspire us and also to give us direction. And if you look at their teachings, you'll find they each of them focus on particular facets of what it is to evolve spiritually and consciously. And putting them all together, which is something I do with my work, is, not all of it obviously, but certainly enough to really get a move on, shall we say, gives us a guidebook, if you like, because I like something labelled a little bit so that I say, okay, I'm aware that I lack that part, or I'm not very strong in that area. That's something I want to concentrate on. So, another thing, each of us has the Holy Spirit within. Oh yes, I've forgotten my friend Saint Germain here. I must just include him, because he famously said that, which I love, you can have all the knowledge in the world, and he also said there's a lot of walking libraries. But he also said knowledge that isn't applied is as useless as undigested food. And so that's why I move on into the how-tos and how do we know, because without that we get pretty well stuck in the theory but not the practice. Also, through the connection with the higher self, I call that the higher mind as well. And you can actually go and prove this for yourself. And I do invite you to do that because it's great fun. But at the same time, what you achieve means you are creating, as it were, a pathway for others to follow. So you are actually feeding it also into that quantum field that you heard about and making it more available to others who are going to come on behind. So although we're doing it on ourselves, some of this personal work, it is actually helping the whole movement of humanity. And Prima Ravat, as an Indian sage, he said, when you truly know who you really are, then you will prosper. So, as I said, how to begin and how to turn theory into practice and not be the walking libraries that Saint Germain called them. Okay, I'm going to share with you my particular favourites, things that work for me. And of course, this is only a way. There are many countless ways. I would just like, because this is my passion, share with you a little of my way, and maybe it might seed some thoughts that you can then go and develop your own, of course. There's no one method, but I've got some methods that work for me, and I'll just give you a little outline in this short talk, some of the basic principles, because even if you go and use other methods, there are still certain principles that still will apply. Now, this is a very famous saying, knowledge is power. Then conversely, lack of knowledge is lack of power, and of course, lack of understanding. So if you are lacking in the knowledge, how can you even discern? And discernment is essential, isn't it, in this day and age, when you've got this massive World Wide Web that is filled with everybody's thoughts and beliefs and theories, as well as, of course, a lot of fact as well. And discernment is the key. To be able to sift out that which resonates and has some foundation and validity from those which are pure speculation. And there's nothing wrong with speculation, that's how science works. They posit a theory, and then they set out to prove or disprove whether or not it's valid. So theories are fine, but you know, the tendency can be to say, oh, well, I saw it, so it must be true. Well, we, of course, know better than that, don't we? So I'm going to just give you one or two thoughts with a particular application, but of course it goes across the board. And ones that I've personally developed for myself is on self-healing and on creating miracles. Do you believe in miracles?
Yes.
I know they're real. Now, a miracle, okay, again, it's semantics, but to me a miracle is something that you're able to create the space for it to occur, which goes beyond the normal boundaries of 3D limitation and how things should or usually are. So when it steps outside that boundary and you think, whoa, that's something way, way beyond what one would have expected, to me, I call it a miracle. Maybe little miracles, but lots of little miracles add up to big ones. Okay, I use a reference, which I will very briefly share. And again, it is not a necessary one, but what has given me a lot of inspiration is understanding a very ancient glyph, and no, boards are full. Okay, so I won't worry. And that is called the Universal Tree of Life, which I'm sure you have heard about. Now, most cultures, I have noticed, in Manly Hall's work, for example, where he's done research of the Secret Teachings of All Ages, is his wonderful book, many, many cultures refer to a tree of life. Okay, they've got their own picture of it or their own understanding of it, but it still basically says the similar principle, that it is a source or an inspiration of knowledge or a way of looking at the world.
Right in front of the podium is the tree of
Yes.
life.
Oh, yes, thank you.
All the dimensions.
Thank you. Come into that. Yeah, it was very good you put that up. Thank you. Because to me, you can look at it. That's another one. I didn't know you were going to bring that, but it's very similar. It shows you in a very symbolic and simple to understand form creation from the top down. And also, as you can see, there is a lightning flash. It's called the lightning flash. Can you see the path going up? Our return journey back to reunification with the higher part of our being. Now, the interesting thing is, everybody on the planet will agree with the bottom part of it. And this is what's really quite fascinating. I don't think it's working yet. Down here, Malkuth, represents the physical body and the physical world. So everybody in the world will say, yep, we know that, we've got a body. Everybody will say, yes, we've got a mind, because over there we have Hode, which represents the rational thinking intellect. Now my interpretation is somewhat unorthodox, I'll warn you, so it may not be as you've seen it in textbooks, but bear with me, because to me I feel that you need to apply an MRI scan on the ancient wisdom. And by that I mean to make it modern, relevant, an interpretation for now. So the MRI for me is the way I look at it, and while it still of course reflects the original intention, but there is a way of interpreting it that makes it really relevant now. Then we have over here, we have Netzach, which represents the emotional side of us. So everybody in the world can say we've got that, and down here, which is a bit dark in between, is Yesod, and that means literally the foundation, and that also represents the subconscious mind, which ties in exactly what I was saying earlier with the understandings of the subconscious. So all of us can agree, we've got a physical world and a physical body, we have a subconscious mind, we have a rational thinking mind, and we have an emotional side of us, a quotient. So everybody in the world, from that point of view, will agree of that lower part of the tree of life. Pretty cool. Then, of course, if we move on, then we come to Tifereth, which, as you can see, is in the center and is a gathering place for all the higher energies. And in the understanding I have, that represents the higher self, or the over self, in my terminology, is the same. So from there we have Geburah. I'm going to back up the tree, but I'll explain why it gives me confidence coming down. We have the power, the justice, and the strength. We also have the law of cause and effect there. In other words, the divine will and the divine order that's inherent in the universe. But of course, if you said to somebody who's really suffering out there that there is divine order and there's divine justice in the universe and in your life as well as mine, they say, really? Or words probably ruder than that. Because there doesn't appear to be. But once you understand the basic law of cause and effect, which when applied to us, we can call it karma. Science says for every action, there's a corresponding reaction. For us, whatever we have set in motion, the cause, there is an effect. When we realize that we are responsible for what is happening in our lives, then of course that takes on a whole new meaning. But of course it's not very palatable, is it, for some people? It's much easier to blame someone else, or something else, or the government, or whatever. So there is, and that gives us the power to know that we can actually create the causes that we wish for the effects that we desire. Then you've got Chesed here, which the literal translation is usually mercy or beneficence. Now to me that means that the universe is a beneficent and a limitless place. I like to translate that as limitless, because there is no limit in creation. Why should we be limited? Who subscribes to the belief, to the saying that I'm a divine being having a physical experience? Did you all go along with that one? Okay, so why on earth do we struggle so much? Why is life seemingly so hard? Have you ever thought about that?
It's the 95%.
Partly, absolutely, spot on. This is what got me thinking, look, well, many decades ago, well, okay, I subscribe to that, so why aren't I a better expression of that divine me in physical form? What's stopping me? And this is actually part of how I got really going on all of this. I thought there has to be more to life than the limitations that we think we're caught up. And yes, of course there is. But like Einstein, I'll paraphrase it here, he says, you can't fix a problem on the level that it was created. Yeah, so we go to the higher levels. And this is the understanding that I work with. Very basic, but it works. Then beyond the Chesed, we've got up here what's called the supernal triad, the three aspects, if you like, of the divine. We have Bina, the feminine principle, which, as I understand it, is also the seat of the Holy Spirit, Shekinah. We have Chokmah, which is the wisdom, the divine mind, the divine wisdom, and also associated in the Kabbalistic translation of this is the divine name of Yod-Heh-Vod-Heh, or Yahweh. And here we have Kether, the crown, which is beautifully shown on Dr. Hertak's picture there with the crown over the head. the I am that I am, because everything comes from that. Now, what is not shown on this, sadly, but is on that chart there, is that above this there are 3 arcs. And the top one is Ain, and it means nothing. No thing. Even Professor Stephen Hawkins, who's probably one of the greatest minds in the physics world today, he said in his book, everything comes from nothing. And I thought, yeah, if you look at this model, and this is a model, everything comes from nothing, no thing. Okay, the second arc, if you can imagine a secondary arc under that, is Ein Sof, or Ein Sof, means without limit. There's the limitlessness I'm talking about. And then below that, the lower of the 3 arcs is the Ein Sof Ur, the limitless light. And everything is from the light, and everything will return to the light. And if we take that principle, whether it's not necessarily literally, but use it as a guideline, you can see our potential is beginning to come through. So what I love about this is simply the fact that it gives me confidence that although I'm down here, yes, and I've got the subconscious and the two aspects of brains and emotions, I'm actually coming from a higher aspect, which if you look, is fed in from all these higher, beautiful, divine powers which are beyond human comprehension to a large extent. It's the, oh wait a minute. Still wants to come back to. In other words, our higher self is the focusing of all these divine powers and attributes, which again, now see how it feeds out through into our thought processes, if we choose to tap into them, into our emotional body, through our subconscious, and down into us here. Can you see? So we're not only subject to emotions and the rational thinking and the subconscious, yes we are, because they feed into it, we also can bring in the higher self powers, which in turn is the repository of all the higher divine powers. To me, that gives me a sense, yes, there's the divine aspect. And if I can tap into that, then I can access way beyond what's down here at the very bottom. So now, I will do the next one, which I just thought was fascinating, that a few years ago, a crop circle appeared in exactly that. Isn't that amazing? So when I was in England once, I read a local paper that was explaining the local, I was in Wiltshire around that area, and somebody was trying to explain these crop circles. And their opinion, and I kid you not, said they thought it was hedgehogs rutting. Really advanced hedgehogs, in my opinion. I kid you not, that was in print. Okay, so we realise that this is not, there's a far more to that. Even the proportions are correct and the whole structure. Anyway, so we are light. We're from the light, we're returning to the light. Now, what does light mean? Well, I can't go into that, of course, but to my understanding, very briefly, is that we can manifest the light in any form we choose, whether it's mentally, that's the light of illumination, of inspiration, and insights. To me, that's all part of that kind of application. The emotional light of love, because to my understanding, you could say love and light are partners. To the physical light, bringing it into, and think about our terminology in English, it's quite colourful. When we're feeling happy, we say we're light-hearted. We step lightly. You think about it, there's a lot of references to light in that sense too, into the very physical and to the emotional. And when we feel it, we feel light, don't we, when we're happy? And then when you don't, you feel down here and heavy. Okay. So it's love-based, and the more we know this, obviously I'm only repeating something you all know, and when we realize that, we can actually start living from this higher perspective. And I came across this lovely little song which sums it up, which I thought you might just enjoy. She sums it up rather beautifully. Did you notice that was in it? The Merkaba, and Dr. Hertax has put out a wonderful, of many, many award-winning DVDs. One of them is the Journey of the Starseed, is that right? Yes. Which shows you the Merkaba and all that aspect, and they have another one, light body. So if we've probably run out, but we can take orders if you wish to get it, because they're really inspirational. They give you a visual, and they're so beautifully done that they can inspire us. Okay, let's move on. So here's some of my how-tos. But first of all, I used in my little blurb in the program Napoleon Hill's famous quote, C plus B equals A. Whatever you can conceive and believe, you can achieve. But I think you've also got to start with reversing that as an ABC. Because, now here's some of the laws I mentioned before. First of all, the A, the universal law of acceptance. Because that says two things. It's got two variations. And most people think, oh, well, if I've got to accept it, then so be it. And the inner voice said to me once, if you accept it, it's yours. Now you can apply that positively, or you can apply it negatively. For example, if you've been given a death sentence or a prognosis, unfortunately, by the medical profession, which I know they mean very well, but unfortunately they do this, if you accept it, it's yours. And immediately you have stopped any chance of a miracle recovery. You think about it. In fact, you even hear it in the conversation, particularly being the end of winter here. You hear one person saying to another, have you had flu? And they say, not yet. Guess what? So if you accept something, then sure enough, you're likely to manifest it. So if you have a condition, as I chose to challenge myself in this lifetime, in fact, I did ask my higher self, what the heck did I bring? I brought two degenerative bone conditions in this body in this lifetime. So they were with me from birth, and they flared up in adult life. What on earth did I bring these in for? And the answer was, well, if you didn't have something to work on, you wouldn't work on it, would you? Right. So in other words, if I'd accepted it, which I've still got the MRI scans and CT scans they took at the hospital, the x-rays, with the report saying this, this, and this, and this, and according to the surgeons, the orthopedic surgeons, there's nothing they can actually do about it. And I saw this, one of them was a hereditary thing in the female line. My mother and her sister had this lower back degeneration. It just simply degenerates and crumbles, which means you end up in excruciating pain. You can't walk, you can't stand. My mother also decided that that was not an option for her, so she didn't accept it and she healed herself. And I had to do the same. Otherwise, the prognosis was like my aunt, who, bless her, ended up on painkillers and steroids and eventually completely bedridden and in agony. That's not a nice way to live. So the methodology I developed from that is what I'm going to give you some pointers on today, and maybe it'll inspire you to do something. But the crucial thing is, first of all, do you accept it or not? Or do you accept it's possible to do something about it? Therefore, can you believe it's possible? And then do you have the certainty, not just the hope? Hope is unfulfilled. Certainty. And okay, if you can be sure, why is your certainty? For me, it's because I know I'm a divine being having a human experience. That's enough for me. So I call upon the higher part of me to do it. And I have no idea how it works, but all I know is it does work. As you can see, I can walk, I can stand, I can dance, and so on, and I'm free of pain. In fact, the latest, I had a chick, go for something, and he said, oh, well, you really don't need, this was, we could try something. And I thought, thank you, no, thank you. And he said, oh, you must have a very high pain threshold. I didn't say that actually I have no pain at all. There's no point, because, that's their mindset. Okay, so going back to Napoleon Hill's lovely formula, I'd like to just expand it. First of all, here's some thoughts on it that you might like to think about. Can you conceptualize what it could be like, the condition you would like to manifest? Doesn't matter whether it's a health one or a miracle of some other kind. Miracles have got no boundaries, remember that? And therefore, are you going to be focused on it enough to, and there's the law of attraction, yes, from Secret, of course, it's absolutely valid. Another alternative is, I want to create something. How? Be mindful and act in an aligned way. Being mindful of your speech, of your thoughts, of what's coming through from the subconscious. If you're not mindful of it, you won't pick it up that you've got what I call sabotage programs that are going to destroy it totally. And then you act in an aligned way. You choose to be boundless so that you can allow. What are you going to allow? For me, in the healing process, I was conscious of a blueprint in the DNA which I was choosing to actualize, and I believe this is all part of our ascension progress, and that is that, and this came again from the Keys of Enoch. As you can see, it's been such a blessing to me and many others. This comes from Key 202, don't mind me quoting to you, because this is part of my journey, this is what's helped me so much. That the God Code blueprint in the DNA, I think Dr. Herdak was the first one ever to put this out, and it's been taken by other people since. Actually, in the Hebrew Aramaic, even in, I haven't put it down in the Hebrew writing, I shall come to, when you take their value of their, the numerology of Hebrew letters, which is 10, which reduces to 1, and that is exactly the same, this is to me amazing still, as the atomic weight mass of hydrogen from the periodic table of elements reduced to a round number, hydrogen, and this is the main, I gather, elements in physical creation. Going back to the earlier religious and spiritual understandings, it was also related to the fire element. Then you take the hay worth 5, which is the same as nitrogen, and that relates to the air. And the vowel or vowel, which is when we transliterate it like that, it looks like a W, is 6, which is the same as oxygen, which is equivalent to the water. To me, that just blew me away when I began to start understanding that. So what does this mean? It means that we've got this blueprint also. Then the next, apart from that connection, we have this as our original perfect, this is my language, please note, I'm not trying to quote anyone else's work, but how I interpret it is that means that within our DNA there must be, I believe, the original perfect God code. And if we can restore the activation of that, or reactivate it, call it what you like, it will then overcome, because of it's so perfect, all of the imperfections, and in my case, the physical outcomes of, well, in this case, genetics. And that's what I focused on working on. Instead of looking at what appeared to be the visible outcome, I looked on the perfect blueprint that was originally there. And if you look at it in the Hebrew, Hebrew reads right to left. So here you've got, that's the yod, that's the Y. Here's the hay, which is there. Here's the vav or vow, which is the W. And here's a repeat of the hay. And when you write it like that, what does it remind you of? Look like a little person? This to me, which again to me reminds me that I am of divine origin. I am not just this physical manifestation. To me, these are my little inspirational bits that I found. And the other thing I love about it, that the yod, which I mentioned before, which is worth 10, we've actually got 10 digits. And quite recently I realized that 10 is the 10 Sephiroth on the Tree of Life. But also in the system that I've been given to work with it as principles that we all have to work on, like developing Christ consciousness or unconditional love, for example, is one of them. You can actually remind yourself, you're carrying around your reminder code in your 10 fingers. And interestingly enough, when you look at your hands like that, the first one and the last one, if you looked at the Tree of Life, would be from the Kether to the Malkuth, from the top to the bottom. So within that span, you've got the whole lot. Anyway, that's my little fun game with that. Okay, so here's my methodology. Dr. Hertak in Key 317 also talks about tonal lines. And from my understanding, this is they're sort of to do with, or an extension of a high application of the, as we would say, the meridians. And please correct me in your talk if I've got it quite incorrect. But these connect through, when they're reactivated or restored is the word I prefer, connect us more strongly to the power of the higher self, which in turn is connected, of course, to the cosmic grids. So, we have ABC, now we've got D, and D is the first step. You must deactivate the causal seed of whatever condition it is you want to change. Whether it's the healing, whether it's a miracle of financial abundance that you wish to improve. I used this once before when I was in Europe and I was in Copenhagen. I wanted to get to Arles in the south of France, which is quite a long hike, and the plane got delayed 12 hours. Normally that would have been impossible to have reached Arles to be at, it was actually your seminar the next day, 10 o'clock, and I used these processes. I worked on it all day sitting at the airport in Copenhagen, and the miracle happened. It's too long a story to tell you. I've got it written out if anyone wants to see it. These miracles can go across the board. It was just fantastic. I was thrilled to bits. So, okay. The divine name codes, and you will hear a lot more about this, of course, tomorrow in the Dr. Hertak's work, because the divine name codes and decrees are just so powerful. I use them every day to remind myself and to retune, to realign. And also I use the divine names of what's called the Shem Hamfresh to help focus. And I do teach this as a methodology. If anyone's interested, I will have a flyer over there. I'll be sharing it in October if anyone's interested to come and learn how to do it. And also, of course, the new research from, we've got Russian research in particular, is saying that sound changes your DNA. And the Russians are researching this. And in one lot of words, it says the individual person must work on the inner processes and development in order to establish a conscious communication with their DNA. Well, one of the best ways I know is to use these chances, to use these divine names. And you'll learn, I know I'm sure about it tomorrow, you'll be using a lot of them. Because the sound vibration really works on multi levels. And the Russians have done always some research, sometimes ahead of everywhere else. And they have actually found that they're now researching it and actually proving it again. And this is what I just think is so exciting. Anyway, moving on. So what's F, E, F, and G? Express your desired outcome. Focus on the outcome. That's the next key. Don't think how, why, what's logical. Forget all that. Just say, my outcome is that I never use want or need. Why? Because you can stay wanting or needy. I say I choose, or I require, or I desire. Okay? And then you focus on it. Hebrew word for it is kavanah, which encompasses all of these things. You keep the attention, the fervor, the enthusiasm, certainty, and direction. And don't forget the big G, the gratitude. And we know all of that if you've done any reading whatsoever. And if you focus and work on that, you will find it works. Why does it work? Okay. The higher physics makes us realize we are non-local, multidimensional beings. You've heard that, and this is part of it. We are part of a higher blueprint within, in our DNA and beyond. We're part of what I call the source consciousness field that's in resonance with the higher consciousness. So we can select what information we want and bring it back. Maybe this is the next human. Notice, I love this one. It's got here, Yod-Heh, Vod-Heh. In the heart soul center, spiraling back, connecting to the universe. I think that's very, very appropriate. So here we are, multidimensional, non-local beings. We're part of that. See, information we bring back, what we focus on, and we bring it into form. So we take the information that we want, the outcome we want, we picture it, we know it, that's what we focus on. We bring it then into form because we are part of this higher blueprint. So I would like to just conclude sort of saying, to me, these are just some little pointers that I've pulled together and I work with and have wonderful joy and passion in sharing with other people if they're interested, as a way and other ways to look at things or to add to what you already know, it doesn't matter. It's also reflecting the as above, so below. You've all heard of that, as above, so below. We can say we're below and we have an as above aspect of us. And interestingly enough, the 7 steps A to G, I believe, is helping us to bring in this age of the Holy Spirit. And like all the ascended masters, we can do miracles, oneness, love, service, abundance, and self-healing. And I believe evolution occurs one human at a time. I really believe that. So I hope you do too. So let's say together to finish off. Life is wonderful. Life is wonderful. Life is a miracle. Life is a miracle. Why don't we stand up? I am divine. I am divine. I am light. I am light. I am limitless. I am limitless. I am a next human. I am a next human. I am all.